college is a scam, and everybody knows that. This isn't like a debated thing. I don't think people are extreme enough about it. We've always been about being the greatest. How do we produce the best possible work, take care of our customers in a way they've never experienced, get better and faster at everything all the time? I'm choosing to spend a lot of my time with my kid. I believe that investment is good for society.
The problem right now in the inner cities is you don't have fathers in the homes. I wish that every family had a mom and dad in the home. 2052, you talked about running for president.
$115 billion to give the 800 million people who don't have access to water, fresh water, which is the same amount of money we've sent to the Ukraine. Well, as president, I can solve that, but I don't want to be owned by anybody, and I want to self-run.
Nathan Ruff, you're a serial entrepreneur since the age of 12 and the founder of the OneNine web agency. You said you have three major goals in life: to ensure everyone on Earth has access to clean water, to provide enough value that you achieve $1 billion net worth, and to run for president in 2052 and win. You're now writing a book titled The Art of Trying as a unique way to inspire others to go for their goals and not overthink success. Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're a local guy. There's not a lot of us walking the streets anymore. Where did you grow up in Nashville?
So I grew up in Bellevue next to Leveless Cafe.
Okay.
And lived there until I was 18, and then just have now lived all over Nashville, like every zip code, I feel like.
Okay. And you said you were homeschooled. What was it like being homeschooled in Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of ways to do it right. There were families in our neighborhood that did it really right. My parents, I don't think, planned to homeschool me, and then they ended up homeschooling me. And so, like, the way to do it right is, like, get your kid involved in sports and get them involved in other homeschoolers. And so, like, I was just very, like, secluded and sheltered and just kind of like, here's books. Thankfully, I found the internet at a young age. I learned to code at a young age, and I learned to make money online. I mean, I remember I built my first e-com website when I was 16, and we were doing six figures by the time I was 17. So, like, I was selling stuff on eBay when I was 12. Like, I'd always kind of, I felt like our life sucked because we were poor, and that's not true, but that's how I thought, at least. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna change that. And so I saw the internet as this way to, like, kind of level up everything. And I would meet, like, somebody that went to MBA or a girl that went to Harpeth Hall, and they would tell me, like, oh, if you're not going to an Ivy League school, you'll never be anything. And I was like, nah, I think I got this. I think the internet's way better and bigger than you can possibly fathom.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were saying you didn't have a lot of money growing up. I was the same. And, I did have this desire to not have the struggles that I saw my parents go through. I had great parents, but they definitely struggled for a long time. How much did that affect you?
So, like, my dad would always say, like, money won't make you happy. And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, well, either we're being poor, like, it's like, there's just, like, a little bit of common sense that people apply to these, like I have this favorite joke of, like, money won't make you happy, but I'd rather cry in a Ferrari. Right. And it's like, I just feel like most problems are solved with money. And so for me, it was like, I just felt like all the problems we were facing, like, I have two grandparents that both live in Texas. They've now passed away, and I would get to see them every other year because, and even though they were 2 hours from each other, but it's like, well, once a year we'd go see a grandparent. Yeah. Because either my dad couldn't get off work or didn't have the money to, like, go see, but, I don't know the whole story. But as a kid, I was like, oh, I guess we just can't afford it, And, yep. And so I just remember thinking, my dad told me this, like, my entire life, like, being, like, making money won't solve anything. And I just kind of ignored it. And then when I made money, I was like, yeah, I was right. Like, life is way better when somebody cleans my house and I live in a nice home and I drive a nice car and my wife gets to be a stay-at-home mom with our kids and we get to go travel the world. Like, life is way better this way. And, like, what we're able to do as far as, like, the organizations we partner with, between the employees that we decide to elevate their pay in their lives, like, what we're able to do with it is, like, if you want to make a change, you got to make a lot of money. And all these entrepreneurs say that. It's like a very, common cliche thing. But when you just, like, for me, we just signed some baller clients and we're like, okay, I now, like, because there's always other levels, I remember when I got my McLaren, I thought, like, I was doing pretty well. And my client showed me his 4 Ferrari F40s, which are about $3 million a piece. I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. And so, it's not like, there's obviously a certain amount of money where it's like the more to it doesn't really change anything. But I definitely think money is a great motivator and not a bad thing to be driven by, because like if you're not a con artist, you're just not going to con people.
Right.
Like you could be a poor con artist. There's probably a lot of very poor con artists.
Yeah.
That's just a frame of mind. Like they con people for a living.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Lloyd Irvin, said, money solves all problems, not having money cause. And it's like, if you think about that, there's a lot of problems that lack of money cause. And it's definitely not everything, but it definitely makes life a lot easier. And, as an entrepreneur, at least my experience, I've almost been bankrupt multiple times. And, that lack of money even there caused a problem. It's like, gosh, if we had this, we could do X, Y, and Z. I think those help mold our business and kind of molded us into better business people, able to relate to people a lot more. But, there is definitely something to that. That said, I do wonder, like, I don't have kids yet, but when I do have kids, I want them to work and I want them to struggle because I feel like we grow the most when we have those struggles and obstacles.
Yeah, but how do you create that is like the $1 million question. I'm in a mastermind group called Hampton, I don't know if you've heard of it. And the average like revenue of somebody in Hampton is 42 million. Of people that apply, only 8% get in or get an offer to join. And it's not like super expensive. It's just exclusive and a well-vetted crew. And there's people in there that are, there's lots of 9-figure people in there. Mm-hmm. And this is like a common discussion in the Slack channel is like, well, how do we, because it's like, I don't know if we're like, the whole idea of like, it doesn't teach a kid anything if you fly to Japan in first class and he flies in coach. It really doesn't. That's not like, like all my drive comes from like consistently things sucking, mm-hmm. But you don't want to like consistently, set things up to suck. I found in Nashville, I've met a lot of trust fund kids, Vanderbilt's here, that just exist. And a lot of them are really great people as far as really kind, but just not driven to like make money or build a company or make a change in society. And that's what I'm trying to change. It's like, I don't care if my son's like a nice person that everybody's like, he's so friendly. I care if he like mates waves. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's innate. For me, I've always felt like if God put me on this earth, I'm doing a disservice to my beliefs by not getting after it.
Sure, absolutely.
And so I hope that my kids can hopefully empower that. And I share this a lot with the goal that they start to believe that too.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when I do have kids, I was a professional fighter and trained fighters for many years. That was my whole life before the hospital group. And I'm definitely getting my kids in the MMA gym. I won't push them to fight, but you learn so much from going through those struggles of wanting to give up and, overcoming the adversity of getting your face beat in. And
are you going to 306?
What is that?
Or like the UFC fight in the Sphere?
The Sphere, yeah. Well, we're the official stem cell provider of the UFC. Oh, okay. So we're at all of them. We have 14 people coming out. Oh, good. Yeah, we'll have to meet up.
That's great.
Actually, Bobby Kennedy, the third, RFK's son, just texted me. He's going to go with us too, and so we'll have a little crew out there. I think that helps a lot. The fighting aspect, at least for Scotty as my business partner and Dedrick as well, and Dedrick bought my MMA gym right after I had retired, and Scotty came from the fight world as well, and so we kind of relate everything to fighting. It's like business in many ways is like an MMA fight. You've got a certain amount of rounds. You have your goal to win. When you go into a fight at a high level, you have to have strategy, game plan. You have to stick to the game plan, but then you have to realize that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, as the great poet Mike Tyson said. So, I look at things a lot like that.
Yeah, I think it's I look at a lot of things like war, and I think it helps me a lot. I was doing like a fun little golf tournament, and somebody's like, "You having fun?" I was like, "Nope." And I was like, "I'm here to fucking win." That's what I'm here to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not here to people love to make excuses to get drunk. It's one of my like funny things to watch. Mm-hmm. It's like Like, oh, I love the UFC. It's like, oh, okay, how do you think Israel Adesanya performed? Oh, I don't know. Oh, you love getting drunk, or you love going to events, or like, and so same thing in golf. But it's like, I look at, especially business is like, yeah, it can be fun, it can be rewarding, it can be exciting, but it's also a lot of war, and especially at, if you have a couple hundred employees, which we don't, we have about 65. And so, but it's still a good amount of team to manage. It's like, sometimes, you're at war with people.
No doubt. I look at things, I was with my MMA school, built it to the largest in the country at one point. And we had a clothing line called Gameness. We were the largest supplier of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu martial arts uniforms in the world. And, back then I was very just hardcore in the business. Like it was, everything was, a fight. And if they weren't with us, they were against us. And I had that kind of mentality. As I've kind of evolved, when I look at a situation, I always try to create a win-win. So because for me, if someone else is losing within the business deal, it might create animosity. It might create, and the camaraderie of doing business together, the camaraderie of the other person not feeling like I'm getting one over them. It helps from, big picture to me. And that's a shift that I really created over the last, 2024. So the last 12 years, actually, since I got out of the MMA business, that's all I knew was fight. And, but it is like war in many ways. And I think that sometimes in war though, you can create wins for everybody, because ultimately you want to, not have the battle all the time.
Yeah. We have customers that treat everything like we're trying to screw them. And that's the people that it's like they're constantly in war mode. I guess when I say it, I mean the bank's like, hey, we're not going to renew this line of credit. And I'm like, no, you're going to renew this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or we can't get a Facebook ad to work, for our own, we don't run Facebook ads for people, but just for our own leads. And it's just try. It just feels like you're at war with Facebook, and so that's what I mean by the analogy, not of not everything's conflict or a code red.
Yeah, I got what you're saying. So you have about 65 employees. What's it like being the leader, and what type of leader do you like to be to your employees?
So I always say I'm a terrible leader. And maybe that's self-awareness, maybe it's a little bit of humor, but there's some people that are I came in and I gave, there's that silly guy that runs a payment processing company on LinkedIn that I see all the time. He's like, we pay everybody $80,000 a year or more, and they get free healthcare and free this and and we, and 8 months off for paternity leave for male and women. It's cool. I don't know your profit margins. Mine aren't that.
Right.
And so we've always been about being the greatest, and so we have a culture of greatness. So I don't, it's not that I don't care that, you and your boyfriend just broke up or whatever, or I don't care, but it's we've always been focused on the work. And so there isn't a lot of us hanging out for parties and us flying in for retreats. There's just a lot of how do we produce the best possible work, take care of our customers in a way they've never experienced, get better and faster at everything all the time.
Yeah.
And so that personality pairs very well with somebody who also is cool, I don't want you to know about my private life. I don't, I used to have this better than thou mentality. And I remember one time I said on a podcast interview 10 years ago, if I ever found out my employee cheated on his wife, I'd fire him. Huh. And now I'm I don't condone it, but that's his life. As long as he builds or develops or unless he does his job at his company, his job's here done. Yeah. And I've realized that people really love that because they don't want politics. They don't, we're a web design agency. So obviously COVID vaccine would never come to play, but they just want to be able if you want to get 12 vaccines or you want to get 0, they just want to be cool, I want a job where I'm there to do great work.
Yep.
And so it takes, people join because everybody says that, and then they see that our culture is very much about that. But once they get that, they're okay, it really quickly weeds out the people that are for that it works for or doesn't.
Yeah. Well, culture is everything, not everything. I guess it's a lot in a company, especially, I've got pushing 250 employees. And so it's and I never managed that many people until the last 9 years till we built it. And, I think for me as a leader, I want the employees to know that I have their back no matter what, as long as they're doing what they need to do for the company. And, that's really been like a shift in the last 3 years where I've focused on, because as we're growing, it's like, okay, because ultimately as business owners, our job is to get the most out of everybody. And and I realized too that, those that have been with us for a long time through COVID, we were almost bankrupt, they've grinded it out with us. And, ultimately the team is the most important thing. It's more important than any one single, individual.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do surveys, HR does surveys with the employees, and man, the scores are higher than ever, and they are producing consistently. They're learning how to be leaders themselves. It's really cool, the kind of the evolution of that for us over the last 3 years. Because before, we'd have nursing talking about striking and oh my gosh, it's all this, it was a lot of drama within it. And, maybe that had to do with me not having the experience, or Scott or Dedrick and I not having the experience to work through that, because I'm like, well, you want to quit, but it's really kind of evolved that way. So the leadership conversation is something that I have a lot right now in my head and amongst my friends, or, people that own businesses like you, because ultimately it's about how do we get the most out of.
Yeah. I mean, going from 25 to 50 was our biggest of, we're like, oh no, we hired a lot of really great freelancers that don't know how to work as a team. Mm-hmm. And that was the biggest retooling.
Yes.
Because it's you'll find a lot of rock stars that don't like being told what to do or how to do it, or don't work with others.
Yep.
And that's not, it's not instant, this is why there's a developer that's on her way out currently. And one of my account managers is like, oh, she's so difficult to work with. And I'm like, look, when we find somebody as good as her, we'll make it happen. We're interviewing now, we're trying to make it happen. And, and it's that, because again, she joined a while ago and did really well until we started to really grow. And then was always complain about how other developers write code. And it's like, well, you got to find a way to work together, or show them how you do it, and
yes.
And so, that's the big jump. I feel especially if you go from a couple million to several million, at least in our world, that was the big jump, is learning to work together as teams, not as powerful individuals.
Yes. Yeah. And, and the culture changes with companies too, I think. I mean, I could see our culture has changed over the last 9 years to where it was, it's a certain culture in the beginning, and, where Scotty and Dedrick and I were living in the hospital the first 6 months, and we're there 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, just grinding it out. And, those that could make it through that, we were, I was a lot more difficult to deal with then. So I'm less difficult with the employees now. But those that stuck through it, they now know at least the vision and the mindset that it takes to get through these tough times. And they've become better managers than what I would say I was even 9 years ago. And so it's been interesting watching that kind of evolve.
Oh, yeah. And especially when you're just every day you're like, is this ever going to turn into anything? I mean, for me, when I first started out, I was putting, 20-hour days in, just trying to figure business out. It's I was utterly intense about literally everything. And just because I was, I think, terrified. And I think I just put that on other people. I don't think I realized I was terrified, but I was just I don't know how you build a company. How is this even possible?
Exactly. I can share that. I mean, it's because we don't know. We're doing the best we can with what we've been taught. And, you're in mastermind groups, so you're evolving. And, as those leadership skills get kind of honed in, you start figuring out what works for you, and what works for you is a little different than anybody else. And that's okay. But yeah, my experience with it is, I like to be open to change, especially in myself. And, that ability to pivot to a different type of leader has really supported. And when as soon as it kind of happened, I could see it changing everybody in the company for the better. They're working better. They're creating more teamwork. They see the vision, really sharing the vision with everybody instead of, keeping it kind of close. Helped out a lot. So, what would you say, before your web agency, what were you doing?
So I started when I was 18. So it's like been most of my life.
How old are you now?
I'm 30.
Okay.
I left in 2019 when I was 25. And I started a company called Rabbit. And Rabbit solved the problem with people's phones dying. It was these little 9 by 12 inch kiosks. You could rent a fully charged power brick and rent and return anywhere. And that was like a massive success. And I had never in my life touched something that was like instantly successful. It was like, I'm going to start this, and then nobody cares, and you're like kind of making the market care. But I remember our first like week in business went live in like 25 bars on Broadway. And we did like 500 users, like 500 new users, customers organically. Like no marketing, no advertising, just this little 9 by 12 inch kiosk appears. Some of the bartenders told people what it was when they asked. Others were like, I don't know, even though I had to sign on it. And so that was like, oh, we have something here.
Such a good feeling,
And
right?
it was, I was young then, but in my head, I was like, oh, I've waited my whole life for this.
Yes, exactly.
And so we launched so I started the company in July. We launched end of October. And then in January, we got South by Southwest. We got the NCAA tournament. And we got some large festivals. And we were talking to the NFL to go live in NFL stadiums. We were talking to a bunch of colleges. And I said, we're just going to go all in at live events and like large stuff. Large gatherings. And so January 2020, I was like, that's the strategy. Let's go. So we started to launch, like our plan was to get to launch 12 cities a month. So raising massive amounts of capital, putting together teams in all these cities, and just like really had a plan of like, here's how we're going to scale this thing. And obviously March came. And I remember our CTO is like any good CTO, loves Reddit, lives in a basement, that kind of guy. And he had posted in December, end of December, he's like, man, or January, I think. It was like, he was like, in December, 18 million phone subscriptions were canceled in China. He's like, how crazy is this? And he was like, look at this. This used to be lit. Now it's dark. He's like, I think there's like a plague in China. And so he posted that in like the team Slack, and our head of sales, who's a little more liberal than him, wrote back like, stop watching so much Fox News. That was like his reply.
Wow.
And so that ended, and I was like, guys, cut it out. Like, whatever, you're overreacting. You're being a dick. It's like kind of how I felt about it.
Yep.
And then, COVID hit, and we went straight to zero, and we stayed at zero. And I was like, okay, my wife and I got married in 2021. We had our first kid. And so I just felt like I needed to go raise another, starting at probably 5 million, but then leading to like a 20 million Series A. And that like was just going to take me flying over the US. Like I can go, I can do it, but it was just like a lot of work being away from my newborn and my wife. And so I just kind of took a step back and was like, I'm going to close this chapter. And I think that our moment in time was great. I think the effort to get it restarted, I tried like all of 2020, all of 2021, would just note like everything we'd get, the event would cancel or nobody would show up to the event. So it was just like this grind that I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. So I went back to the agency and I was like, this time we're going to do website management, build our recurring revenue, which is just people paying a small monthly fee to never worry about their website again. And then over the past 3 years, we've been drastically scaling that. That's where all our employees is what everything goes towards.
Yeah. So now your company is it's focused on web development and taking care of people's websites.
Yeah, and it's mostly management. So it's taking an existing website and like hosting it, security, being on standby to handle whatever they need. Like being their outsourced internal web team is maybe a good way of looking at it. So we have Fortune 500 companies, just a couple of them that we like we handle anything for their website. And then we have tons of just like small businesses that are like, yeah, I just want to make sure my website's always live. It's never hat. And when I need updates or need to do new things or build a splash page or get a new video out there, whatever, that your team's there to handle it.
So what makes you different than other companies out there?
So pretty much everybody builds websites, and that's what they're selling. We're selling exceptional support and management of your existing asset. So in the same way, like there's a lot of people that build homes, but you're like, how many people manage properties? It's probably a smaller amount.
Sure.
And so we just manage digital properties is the way I look at it.
Interesting. And so, yeah, COVID had you pivot, to that.
Yeah, because I'd owned the agency. I had like we had accounts, we'd built it up, but we were building new websites at that time. So like we'd make $100,000 one month and then lose 50 the next, and then make like 250 one, then lose 100. Like it was just this highs and lows. And I was like, I just want these small recurring, you do the like everybody always, if you know nothing about business, you're like, okay, well, if I get 1,000 people to pay $20 a month, we'll be rich. Like you do this number. And so for us, like I did that and I was like, okay, the hard part's always getting that many people. But we just, all day, every day, and I now say this because we do a couple hundred book calls a month, so I can safely say this, but it's like people are just like, hey, my web designer disappeared, went out of business, or slow to respond. And that's like all day, every day. And so it's like, hey, for 500 to a couple thousand a month, depending on website size and all the different variations, we handle all that for you. You get an account manager, you have live tracking of everything that's going on. Not sure to pitch or sell the business, but it's like, the goal was like you never worry about your website again for a small monthly fee, and we really nailed that. And so that's been really exciting to watch that grow. Like on Monday, like we signed 6 new customers, and it's like, oh, cool. Like we're getting to that. I want to get to 1,000 customers a year is like what I'm trying to get to. And so anyway, we pivoted into that, and that's been good because like it's recurring revenue. We're crushing it, and I see the exit towards that. I'm like, cool. If we get to this number of revenue, we'll have this number in profit, and we have a great exit because we're valued as like a B2B SaaS.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is the goal? You said you wanted to be a billionaire. Like, is this part of the goal to be a billionaire?
So, I mean, the goal is to ensure everyone in the world has access to fresh water.
Okay,
like, that's the goal. And I think I can do that as president. According to Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water, who's kind of the foremost nonprofit in fixing that, it's about $115 billion is what it costs to give the 800 million people that don't have access to water, fresh water, which is the same amount of money we've sent to the Ukraine. And so, like, if I think if you had to choose, I mean, the American people don't really have a lot of say in these decisions, but it's like everyone in the world has access to fresh water, which will solve like most of these diseases and most of the poverty and most of the stuff comes from like drinking swamp water and dying at age 20 and their kids dying and always being sick and so on and so forth. But so if, we got to choose as American people, like, do you want to solve everything in the world has access to fresh water or like send a bunch of weapons and shit to Ukraine? I think most people would choose water.
Absolutely.
And so like, to have Elon Musk type money, it's like, it's net worth. So he'd have to sell all Tesla, everything to then like fund that.
Yep.
And of course the 30 years in motion to like make that happen. And so it doesn't really seem like something a private individual can do. It's something a government's got to solve or governments have to solve. And so my thought is like, well, as president, I can solve that. But I don't want to be owned by anybody and I want to self-run. And so when you run the numbers, it's like, if I build a brand, which I think is possible, maybe I can run and win on 300 to 500 million, depending on inflation and everything else. But like chances are, I'm gonna have to be like nearly a liquid billionaire and put it all on the line. And so I just kind of like, I'm just a realist about like, I am really trying to run for president and win. And I'm like, all right, I have to make a lot of money to do this.
Yeah. What's your plan? I mean, you have a 30-year plan here?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to exit this business and then it's like 3 years. And that will give me a good amount of cash, around 50 million, nothing crazy. I plan to leverage a lot of that into my next venture. And that's the one that I hope to take public and like get me like a large, either large equity stake or large, large cash flow or large net worth that I can then leverage. And then I still, as far as like growing my personal brand, the art of trying and just like some of the, like my book I'm working on and a bunch of things I'm doing on personal brand. I'm not trying to do anything around business. Like every business guy, like I don't interview, when I had a podcast, I refused to interview entrepreneurs because they all have the same story of like, yeah, I worked really hard for a long time. Now I'm rich. And it's like, oh, wow, inspirational.
Yeah.
And so I love like the Jordan Petersons of this world and just like thought leaders. And so that's where I'm trying to position myself as somebody that's like considered an intellectual, intelligent human being that I can build from there. And so I like to think that I'll build that along with my, political thoughts on a lot of things over the next 30 years. And ideally in 30 years, I'll have a brand and I'll have cash and I can put a good run in.
Nice. Hey, you've also expressed criticism on the education system or thoughts about how to make it better. What would you do?
So, college is a scam and everybody knows that. Like this isn't like a debated thing. And I don't think people are extreme enough about it. Like, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, early like 2010, the new thing that people would say is like, well, college isn't for everyone. And really what you say that is you're like, well, maybe for your dumbass, it's not. You know, it's like, it's not the thing that people really believe. And I think, one, college isn't for most people. But it's just kind of this odd thing. It's like, if you're a business, you're in the stem cell business. Is that correct? So would it be helpful if the government would give anyone in the U.S. a loan for like a loan to go to your clinic?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That'd probably help with revenue, right? If just anybody could just get auto approved.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah. And then no matter how much let's say you raise prices, I don't know, 800% over the past 5 years. And you continue to do that. And then even crazier than that, like your former patients are going to put bumper stickers of your logo on their car. They're going to buy hoodies with your logo on it. And then when they get really rich, they're going to donate back to your clinic because they're so proud that they got stem cells from there. And then they're going to guilt anybody in their family that doesn't want to go there to going because it's a family legacy. We all go to Harvard. We all go to your stem cell clinic. And you're like, you're like, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, it's just like the whole model is like, I think college is a great business. I just think that the government shouldn't back these loans.
Yeah.
I think that they should have to use their $3 billion endowment. It shouldn't just sit tats fucking free there. And so I just think there's just a lot of like ridiculous things about college that I think everybody knows, but they kind of ignore. Like I can't believe people are like, oh, like like college football, isn't that just modern day slavery before you could pay the players?
Not anymore.
Like, yeah, I mean, not anymore, but it's like the fact that was a thing. It's like, wait, so the University of Texas makes $100 million a year off their football team and they get a free scholarship?
Right.
And so you see this stuff and it's like, wait, they're the good organization?
Right.
The organization that makes $100 million off their players and then doesn't pay them?
Yeah.
And so I just think there's like so many ridiculous things about college that now everybody agrees on, but like 20 years ago, they definitely didn't.
Right.
But that, Peter Thiel's right. And like, it can't be fixed. It's too big. It's just got to be torn down.
Yep.
But it starts with like, hey, we're not just going to we're not going to give anybody who wants to go to your place unlimited loans to go there. That's like, if you start a business and you go to let's say you get an SBA loan, like you can't just be like, yeah, I have no way of repaying this. And like, like there's gotta be something. And so, it's just so unfortunate to the kids that believe the lie that they had to do this. And that's what I continue to find. I find a lot of people that are, many of our employees are a lot in debt over student loan.
Yeah, that's wild.
And they're like, yeah, just my parents really, like, they didn't force me, but they really, really pressured me to go sign these loans, get this, and and I learned nothing in college because the things I was passionate about, I learned on YouTube, or I like found a mentor that did it.
Yep.
And so it's just a sick system, and it's kind of like payday loan places. It's like, I think you're a shitty person if you run one of those because it just preys on people. Anything predatory, it's like, yeah, like I think like child molesters should be murdered. You know, it's like anything predatory. I'm like, yeah, it's not.
Yeah. Well, like the thing with education, I mean, like the STEM fields are one thing, but they have a lot of really dumb majors. It's like, gender studies and you're like, they get student loans to learn this opinion because it's not like even real. It's like I don't agree with most of it, and they can do nothing with these degrees except be indoctrinated into a way of thinking that's going to make them miserable because they're teaching you how to be a victim to your circumstances and no personal responsibility.
Yeah.
The STEM fields, I mean, I think education, like college for the STEM fields makes sense. I don't like the student loans either. I actually thought about, if I put $1 billion into a fund, and I'd like to get other billionaires to focus on helping their own cities. So instead of thinking like big, we're like, okay, let's all help our, where we live. And I was running the math. $1 billion fund would support every kid graduating from public school to go to a state school college. And I would do it if they had a 3.0 average or higher going into the STEM fields. Has to be STEM. Might even tighten it up a little bit. But I think on on a non-government level, we can solve those problems better than others. And so I'm for that. I'm in agreement. I don't like the student loans. I don't think that college for most people is a thing. I think we should actually be learning skills and not, some bogus philosophy on how to bring down America, which is basically what these universities are teaching, right?
Well, it's just unfortunate because universities teach this pity on like people that do real work. And it's like, there's so many people that would have an awesome life if they just went and became a plumber. Like they'd make 120 grand a year, maybe even like at starting, maybe go up to like 250 if they own their own company, make millions. And we've just been like, oh, nobody wants to be a plumber.
Yeah.
You just all these people graduating with business degrees, and it's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
It's a really corrupt system, and people act like it's just flawed. It's like, no, it's corrupt. And there's a big difference between being flawed and corrupt.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think of the business degrees? If you have somebody that applies as to MBA, does that make you want to hire them more or less?
Yeah. It used to be like less because I was like, you're an idiot. Now I realize that people are just manipulated by their family. I'm not somebody who really cares what my family thinks. It's not something, to some people that's a really big deal. Their family's buy-in.
Sure.
And I didn't understand that. So now I understand. Like, that's a really, I have an employee I deeply care about, and he's got 100 grand in debt, and I've been working to help pay that off, and because it's like I care about him, and I feel like he feels like he was kind of like tricked by his parents into like getting this degree, and so if they think their degree is special is when I'm always like, okay, let's talk about this. Like, you think this means something. And I've always made the argument of like, yeah, if you could choose between the sales guy that sold $100 million worth of something or the sales guy that has like a sales degree, it's like, yeah, I'm going to choose the guy with experience. Like, experience is the golden ticket in everything. Yeah. Now, and obviously in like the medical field, like there's things we need, we need doctors, we need engineers, we need our bridges to not collapse. But there's, we're losing in that compared to other countries, first off. And yeah, like a business degree is like, anyway, college is such a mind fuck to me, sorry the language, but in so many different ways. And like one of the ways that blows my mind is like, yeah, like we deeply care about education, but we have football teams, we have like sports teams, we have sororities and fraternities, we allow alcohol. It's like, well, if you cared about education, it would be about education.
Sure.
And so it's like this weird
cult.
Yeah. And then like even, I'm a Christian, and I remember a church I was at was celebrating people graduating and going to college. And I was like, I mean, if data shows that 70% will turn away from their faith when they go to college, aren't you like celebrating that they're no longer going to follow Jesus? And like,
is that what the data shows?
Huh?
That's what the data shows?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And I was like, isn't the kind of like a little counter, like, shouldn't we not? And like, oh, well, not our kids, because it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. The not our kids. That's always a great mindset to be like, it couldn't be me.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I feel so sad with the buy-in that the society has to college.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more when I interview somebody who's like, can't wait to tell me about their 3 degrees. Like, I'm going to be impressed.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just always like, what it cost you?
Yeah.
And the good answers were like, oh, I got a scholarship all the way through.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, just 8 years of your life, and like, I just drill into it. 'Cause to me, it's just such a ludicrous, like, trade-off. Like, oh, not only did you go into debt, but then you worked for them for free. Some, like when I hear people like, oh, I pulled all-nighters all through college. It's like, oh, so you just like slaved away, you paid them, and like, it's just like, how do we turn it for our employees is like the joke I always make. Like, man, if I could have people be like, all right, I'll give you 100 grand if you let me work for you for 4 years. I'll work 80-hour weeks. I'll tell everyone I work for you. My parents can't like wait to tell all their friends I work for you. And then I'll shame anyone in our family that doesn't work for you in the future. Like, that is a perfect business model.
Yeah.
Oh, and I don't have the 100 grand to pay you, so the government's going to give me a loan. Like, this sounds great.
It's an interesting take, man. Yeah. There's a lot out there that just, it's largely a scam. I don't think it's completely a scam. I mean, I think if you want to be a lawyer, for instance, you got to go to college. You got to get your law degree. If you want to be a scientist, you don't necessarily have to have a degree to be a scientist, but if you want to get a PhD, you need that. Obviously, a medical doctor, those type of things. But, for the large part, it is just a waste. And especially now, I think now more than ever, it's a waste because the society has changed so much.
And like the whole like prereq thing is like, things are just so weird. Like, hey, make sure you do good in like English 1 and English 2 and like your algebra class. And it's like, yeah, they're trying to be or like your photography class. It's like, why does this exist? Like, you can learn photography from YouTube fairly easily.
That's true. That's the type of, I'm going to say, dumb degree, unless someone just wants to waste the time and money. Yeah.
But even, like, I think if you're a doctor, you still have to do, does everybody have to do prereqs?
Yes.
So it's like, I don't understand why my daughter needs, like, my daughter already has terrible handwriting. I don't think English 1, English 2 is going to change that.
That's true. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's look at that. Like, you're the bachelor for a PhD, let's say in immunology, they need some basic science classes, of course. But a lot of it is garbage and a waste. And I've never really thought about it like that as far as, why do they do the English classes? Why do they do history or those type of things? I mean,
because it's like, wait, didn't we learn all this in high school?
Yeah.
Like, that's another thing. It's just like kind of odd. Like, it's just like it's like 13th and 14th grade is like what freshman, sophomore year is. Yeah. And then I guess like junior and senior in college is like the real stuff. And it's like, why don't you just go straight to the real stuff?
Yeah, because they want more money.
Yeah,
it's a failed model. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to really chew on this because I haven't thought of it like that. I mean, I thought college is largely a scam, but the some of the reasons you're bringing up, it makes me think a little bit. What got you into kind of focusing on this and looking at it like that?
I mean, I didn't go, and so I just had a lot of people like look down or talk down to me because I didn't, and I just like, ran the numbers, and I'm like, I don't get why this is a good idea. Like, everybody I admire didn't go.
Yeah.
Like people I admire, like Ralph Lauren, didn't go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I used to say Zuckerberg before I knew he was like a kind of not a great guy. So I was like Zuckerberg and like Ralph Lauren, like different fields. One's fashion, one's tech. But, I just kind of felt like, greatness always finds a way to be great, and winners always win. And so I get that there's people that need to be taught, and people need to like find their calling or whatever. And I just think there's like a cheaper way of doing that than like $100,000 in a classroom setting.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a whole system. This is how you're supposed to go to school, go to high school, then go to college, and it really isn't very logical how we send people to college at all. Even we can even talk about other schooling too, but yeah, sending people it doesn't make sense. And when I do see these gender studies and these stupid fucking degrees, and the reason I asked you about the MBA was when I get an application and somebody has an MBA, I immediately internally look down. I'm like, oh, they're going to think they know about business, and sometimes they're legit and they're like, oh, this is just a degree.
Yeah,
but
if
sometimes
I see
they're
an
trying to tell
MBA,
me.
I'm like, oh, thank God somebody can hit on my Excel spreadsheets. Like, they are very good at Excel.
Right. Certain things. But it's when they try to tell you how to run your business and, oh, well, that. I'm like, come on, dude. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my favorite thing that some of our smartest employees have come to me with is like, I was thinking, what if we double our prices? And I go, well, I was thinking, if you can convince our customers to go for that, then we will.
Yeah.
But I've never been able to figure that. I've never been able just to double prices and customers not freak out about it.
Right.
And it's just so funny when people have these like simple, I'm like, yeah, I get in your simple math scenario. You're like, we double prices, we'll be at X amount of revenue.
Double price, 6-minute abs.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it made sense until you got to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to go tell, 350 customers that their prices are doubling.
Yeah.
In this economy, I don't, sure. You want to run my company, I guess I'll give you a shot at it.
Yeah.
I'll just walk it back 2 weeks later and be like, I didn't know.
Yeah, it was this guy. Nobody told me.
But yeah, it's just funny. People's like simple conclusions to very hard things.
Right.
And people, the college one's interesting because you pin people and they always like throw out these like, well, it's about the experience. I'm like, what's experience? Like sleeping with a bunch of people or getting drunk a lot or like massive amounts of anxiety, massive amounts of stress. Like what is the experience?
Yeah, no, it's you're making a lot of sense with it. And going to the employee ideas, that's part of being an entrepreneur is like everybody can look at your business from the outside and tell you, oh, well, what if you did this, or you should do this, or you should do that? It's like, do you not think I haven't thought of that and that and that? And
that's my favorite.
It's like, golly, of course.
I love it. Be like, have you ever thought about, like, we build websites, like running Facebook ads? I'm like, I've never, tell me more.
I've never even thought about it. Or you should do this. It's like, okay, I should. Right. Well, probably not. But thanks for the...
Yeah, like my neighbor has been trying to sell me his house for like a year, and it feels like that. He's like, I mean, this view is never going away. And just there, I was like, dude, I'm not going to buy your house, man. Like, I don't know if you are purposely trying, but like every time you see me, you're just like trying to convince me to buy your house, and I'm not interested.
I have no interest whatsoever. This view is not. That's funny.
And that's kind of with employees, like, oh, that's a good idea. You know, you're like kind about it, and then eventually you're like, hey, Steve. It's just not our business plan.
Right. Well, I have fun with our scientists because they do bring really good scientific ideas. And I love that, that camaraderie. It's kind of funny to me when other people are like, well, have you ever thought of doing this treatment? I'm like,
yeah, I'm in the treatment business.
Yes.
And this is all I ever think about.
And we're the most advanced in the world right now. Like, yes, I've thought about doing that. All you got to do is like, that's not all we've got to do. And by the way, we're making that one in-house. But, it's quite interesting. But I think a lot of it's well-intended, but it does show you that, the people that are not entrepreneurs, they look at entrepreneurs and our businesses and like, well, with very, very simplistic ideas, thinking that we didn't at all consider those. And if you think about society as a whole, there's a lot of that. Well, all you've got to do is this. And, I think at the president level...
everything's easy in a bubble.
Right. Yeah. And at the president level, you're talking about running for president, someone needs to communicate that effectively is, yes, we're thinking about this. Yes, we're thinking about that. This is... because if we could package these ideas that we have to make the country better in a way that everybody can realize that there's been a lot that's actually been thought about, I think we can get more buy-in, something like that.
Yeah. When you have such a divided nation, you deal with this thing that everything you do, half the people on the U.S. hate you, and that's a tough thing.
Yeah.
And the problem is, like, the federal government doesn't have as much control over your life as you wish they did. Like, a lot of people like complain a lot, I remember my friend was telling me he's voting for Biden because Nashville roads sucked. And I was like...
because Nashville roads sucked?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, man, you don't know about the federal and state governments? I mean, he's 38. It's like, I don't mean to be rude, dude. I don't think you should vote at all. Like, I don't think you've earned that right, Like, and so it's just, we have a massive education problem. If you had to pour it down, I mean, that's what college, all this is. If college was about education, I'd be all for it.
Sure.
I'm obsessed with education. I read 100 books a year. Like, I love to learn. Mm-hmm. The reason I hate college is because it's nothing to do with education or very little to do. And so that's what when teachers make, our plan is to private tutor our kids. And my net's business is around school. And so I'm very passionate about this because that's what I'm going to take public, and that's kind of my net's thing. But when I looked at, like, I was like, I'm just going to hire a full-time teacher because it's like these private schools are like $15,000 a kid. Mm-hmm. And so I go to like a private, like the same, like, FRA, for example. You go to FRA and be like, hey, what do you pay your school teacher? Like, oh, $38,000 a year.
Yeah, so low.
I'm like, okay, cool, I'll just take them. Yeah. I'm like, hey, do you want to, instead of watching 20 kids, do you want to watch one and then two in a couple years? And you want to travel with us as a family and we'll pay you 50.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, if education is the only thing that's going to set us apart from other nations, I mean, outside of like if you happen to have oil underneath your ground and other things, but it's like we got to invest in it, and not at the college level, but like at the like elementary, middle school, and high school level.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so that's what's really got to be retooled. I mean, yeah, we can talk about all the problems with college, but it's maybe college is so bad because of how bad the kids show up when they get there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you're hiring a teacher to come in and...
Yeah, recruit. We've gone to a couple of the top middle schools, and I've done some LinkedIn searches, and then I've asked people around, like, because I have rich friends whose kids go to that school. I'm like, who's the best teacher? Like writing down the name, send them an Instagram DM.
So 2052, you talked about running for president. Kind of mentioned a little bit about how you want to get there. How do you think your entrepreneurial experiences will help you be a great leader?
So, when we speak about teams, running the U.S. is a giant team. Mm-hmm. It's not like one guy. And there's a lot of bureaucracy, and we don't know what's going to exist in 30 years. Mm-hmm. And so I think the best service I could ever do is tear down most of the government. You know, it's like the best service I could ever do is shrink the government. Like that's the greatest honor I could ever do. And if I was to get assassinated or whatever, like that would be worth it. Mm-hmm. Like if you say, hey, you can make the government 5% smaller, I'd be like totally worth it. And so I understand that a lot of these things I know nothing about because I'm 30 years old and I don't work in government. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the things that people thought Trump would do, like, oh, it's a businessman, he'll balance the budget, he'll do all these things that he did not do, keep in mind, but it's still the right mindset.
Sure.
I just think you have to come prepared for war and not prepared of like, oh yeah, they'll just hand me everything. And I think you have to be prepared of like, this is what we're going to do no matter what. Yeah. And so I don't know where we're going to be at in 30 years.
Right.
And sometimes I see the things that are going on and I'm like, maybe I do just want to retire very wealthy at age 40 and not pursue this. I do love my country. I do look at this as a way to get back to my country. I'm not against, running for governor of Tennessee or like I have no interest in being mayor of Nashville or anything like that, but definitely like governor or president or senate, I would maybe consider. But it's always been like a way to give back. And so if I feel like I can't get anything done, I think lifelong, like I'm for I'm for everything that most Americans are for, like term limits. Like this is a public service thing. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to go give away most of my net worth to have a bat at this. And if I do get a bat at it, I'm like 8 years and I'm out. And let's say I do Senate or governor or whatever. Like if I was governor of Tennessee, it's like, yeah, I'm giving this 8 years of my life. And so that's what it's been to me. It's just like, this is public service and I serve the people of Tennessee or I serve our states, and that's a really tough one when half the people believe you're not serving them. Half the people think you are serving them.
Yeah.
But in general, everybody pretty much agrees on the same things. It's like, everybody is like, yeah, I think we should not start wars. Like, sure. If you own a company that builds tanks, you're like, let's start wars, you know? But like in general, most people are like, I don't think we should start wars.
Yeah, wars are bad.
And then you're like, hey, it'd be cool if people were smart. Everybody's like, yeah, that made sense. Like teachers should get paid. Yeah, that made sense. I mean, that's more of, again, not a federal issue, but again, federal grants and funding. What can we do about that? And so I think we're very united in a lot of these core beliefs. I think once you get to that position, you see there's a lot of red tape and it takes somebody with a business mindset to like go to war with it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are treating it like there's some problems. Like they're treating it like a pan is on fire in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And I think you should treat it like the entire house is on fire.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of people that are like, I'm going to go do this. And they go do nothing. And then, you talk to those people behind closed doors and like, well, I cheated on my wife 20 years ago and they proved it. And like, they had that on me, like there's just all this like stuff that people have. And that's where they really got Trump because he was like, I don't care.
Yeah. He was the first one to say, screw it.
They're like, you cheated on your wife. He's like, multiple times.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
I did it and I liked it. I'm sorry, but I liked it. Not gonna lie.
And so it's just like this, you got to look at it as a war. And I'm not dumb enough to think like I'm going to be able to make a difference when nobody else has.
Yeah.
I do think there are small wins though, and so like, there is little things that make massive differences. And so you're not going to fix it. Like it's been going the wrong direction for a long time. And so I understand that, but I do think I have a good chance of like, hopefully getting what most people agree to, which is like, hey, you shouldn't be a lifelong politician. And we shouldn't be funding all the stuff that we fund for no reason.
Yeah.
And actually our country's pretty great. And as Americans that pay our taxes, we deserve to know everything. So like we should release, like Trump talking about releasing like JFK documents and all that. It's like he said that also the first time around. And the reason he didn't is that because like one guy was like, please, please, please don't do it. They're not ready for this. Yeah. And I think I'm not I joke, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just don't think buildings collapse on top of themselves. If you make like a 9/11 joke or like,
Right.
like all these, but it's like, if people have questions, there should be a forum for that.
Yeah, well, and you think about how much the government has covered up over the years. I mean, I worked on 2 of Ron Paul campaigns, 2008, 2012. And so I kind of got really involved, at the time. And I'm pretty much a libertarian. I mean, that's where I kind of land. And, I saw, though, the pushback then to those ideas. Now they're mainstream. I mean, you got to figure, when Ron Paul got on stage, there was a presidential debate in 2008.
It was like, no Iraq, no Afghanistan.
Oh,
People
yeah.
were like, you anti-American.
Yeah, you hate America. But he just made so much sense with it all. And I think part of Trump's success is because Ron Paul started that conversation of, in many ways, America first, which I like. But the whole landscape has changed so much now. It's not the same as it was just 15 years ago. We are having these conversations, but I would have considered myself more liberal on social issues, 12, 15 years ago. I was pretty left. And I haven't really changed most of my positions, but the left has gone way far left. And, because I'm someone who believes in a super strong First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, like all the way, and freedom of press all the way. And, when Edward Snowden came out, I guess that was 2014, I had been saying very publicly that the NSA was gathering our information, and there were a couple different former NSA employees that got raided by the FBI, and they were saying these things too, like, hey, they're gathering your information, et cetera. And so when Snowden did the release, I was like, finally, everybody's going to know.
American hero. I got a painting of him in my office.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, this guy's awesome.
It's amazing.
That's the guy that loves our country.
Yes.
Who's somehow in Russia.
Yeah. But the way the country reacted, nobody seemed to care. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter. They've been diving into our emails or checking our text messages.
My mom's
without
like, he's a traitor.
Yeah.
I'm like,
what are you talking
what?
about? This is as patriotic as it gets. And I actually lost a lot of, passion after Snowden, because a lot of the things that I had been called crazy about for years came true, and nobody cared. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I was just working on issues that nobody, this isn't important. People are too far gone. And then, fast forward to where we're at today, and a lot of the those conversations are now open and public, and the Democratic Party now, because back then the Republicans were against all that. The Democratic Party now is
for it all.
Yeah, they're for the wars.
Big pharma, it's crazy.
Cutting censorship. They're all for censorship. They're all for the wars. They're all for, like you said, big pharma. And I've watched it shift, but it's the same people that before were for freedom of speech and those type of things. So, it's kind of confusing as a human.
Yeah, I always say, like, I believe I'm a little more liberal than Obama was in 08. So, like, he was against same-sex marriage in 08.
Yeah.
I'm not. And so, but outside that, I believe most of the things he believed. He was anti-war. He was,
Supposedly.
And so, and I always say that, like, obviously tongue-in-cheek, but it's funny to think just how crazy that shift has happened. Because it's like, nobody realizes, I think they do, but it's like, it's pretty crazy that RFK Jr. is supporting Trump. Like, that's a pretty crazy. I've always said, like, hey, I think Bernie Sanders and Trump are more aligned than people realize. Like,
agreed.
There's this one little thing, which is a big thing over, like, capitalism. But outside of that, like, they're both, like, for better education, better healthcare, anti-war, freedom of speech. And so I've always loved people that aren't owned by anybody. Even though I completely disagree with them, like, at least Bernie Sanders isn't owned by anyone.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And so that is something I respect in people, is like, hey, at least you're not, like, because there's, you look at, like, Kemp in Georgia, it's like, that guy clearly is owned by somebody.
The establishment.
It's we'll be curious what happens this year, but definitely over the next 30 years is what I'm planning, is like, all right, I don't know where, that's why I try not to put myself anywhere. I'm like, here's my beliefs, like, I think Like human life's pretty important. I think like America is a pretty great country that could be better, and we should work to make it better. And I think college is a scam. I'm like, I know, like being on the record for that. I'm like, I know where this is headed. Like, I watched what people thought about that 20 years ago versus what they thought now. I know in another 20 years it's over for them.
So, what's your view on Trump?
You know, I care about policy. So liking the person, you know, like Kamala Harris is not a very likable person. That doesn't affect my decision.
Right.
Her sucking at her job is like, why I'm not going to vote for her.
Right.
So Trump is like, I don't think he's a good person, and I don't think he's a good businessman. And
why don't you think he's a good businessman?
So, you know, when you just look at his there's so many records of him, you know, hiring somebody, them coming, sending an invoice, him refusing to pay it, them taking to court and settling for a percentage of it. And so you see that kind of stuff, and we've had customers try to do that to us, and it's like, you know, I just have that bad faith feeling. I've been around him, and he's obviously an incredibly likable person, incredibly charismatic, and it's like it's hard to not like the guy in person. Like when you're around the person, when you're around him, you're like, I don't, you know, maybe the media got everything wrong. Is like, so I get, you know, that, but so I have a lot of, I said that to say I have a lot of different thoughts about that. If I could have Vivek, that's who I would have. Like if you're like, pick your guy, that's who I would have. Like, oh, a young, like self-made, intellectual guy, that'd be great. And then below that, like any just young guy, I think would be pretty awesome. Somebody not owned by the establishment would be like ideal. And so he's the pick because there's no one else.
Right.
I liked, you know, RFK, this is like terrible. I just can't get over his voice. Like it really, like I wanted to listen to him, but like it really, I'm an audible learner and I just really had a hard time like focusing like with that raspy voice, and obviously can't help it. And like, but I agree with a lot of his things of like, hey, you shouldn't be able to buy your way through the food pyramid. You shouldn't be able to just to pollute. You shouldn't be able to poison Americans. You shouldn't be able to like, you know, like I thought the real Anthony Fauci was a great book. You know, somebody's saying like the book's silly. And I was like, I mean, the fact that nobody has sued him, because like if I'm Anthony Fauci and that book is false, I'm going to sue him.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's not even false, I'm still going to sue him because that book made Anthony Fauci kind of look like the worst human on earth.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I really liked him. I just knew he couldn't win. And then he endorsed Trump. So I was like, sweet.
Yeah.
So, you know, in general, Trump is 80. You know, he's just old. And he's a different type of 80. You know, like Biden's 80, and like that's you know, you put those guys side to side. Like clearly, one has more energy and is a little more, has a little more working in his head. You know, and so one of my mentors is 80, and we talk every day. And he's a great friend of mine and super sharp and just on it. I remember he bought a $2 million RV. And he pulled up to my house, and I was like, so what this thing cost? And he was like, what'd your home cost? And he's like, yeah, more than that. I was like, okay. And so he's just like funny, and like he gets sarcasm, you know, because some 80, you know, like if you were to tell a sarcastic joke to Biden, it'd go over his head for sure. So anyway, I think, you know, Trump's our guy because we don't have a choice. I do think he's a little old. And like having somebody that's 80 as president, you know, is like that's a little old. But I like that he seems to be who he says he is. And I think a lot of people, that's what they saw first time around, second time around. You know, the fact that he did an interview with Theo Vaughn, like Joe Biden would never, ever do that.
Sure.
Kamala Harris would never do that. I hope she does. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would be.
So
she won't do an interview with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, just period.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for, you know, Biden hasn't done a great job his last, you know, I'm excited to get Trump back in there.
Yeah.
I would be excited to get any, you know, conservative, you know, somebody like just anybody who loves America, I'd love to get in there, you know, and you know, you could be a 2012 Democrat and love America. It's just like the 2024 Democrats, like that's just kind of not their agenda anymore.
What do you think about all the gaslighting that's happened over the years with Biden, for instance? You know, we could all see his mental decline, yet the media propped him up as sharp as ever. I saw that, was it Joe Scarborough saying, "Oh my gosh, this is the best Biden." This is like in March, just like completely idiotic. But, people bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then, they seemed surprised when he had a bad debate. Actually, I thought his debate, this is funny, I actually didn't think his debate was that bad. I watched it. I was like, well, Biden didn't do as bad as, he could have, knowing where his brain was at. And, the media turned on him all of a sudden. We've been able to see it the entire time. And they're like, oh my gosh. It's like, what is going on here? Like, they didn't know this?
My favorite is that Andy Giannopoulos interview he did after to like make things better. And I'm like, if you thought this interview, Tim Dillon had like a hilarious take. He was like, I just want to start this podcast by congratulating Mr. Trump on his nets. Because, it's like, if you think that follow-up's going to make it better,
right?
He just comes across like a senile man with dementia. And I haven't been around a lot of people with dementia, so I don't know if that's exactly what's going on. But there's clearly a mental decline. And that is like, to dispute that's crazy. It's like to say that like Trump isn't a narcissist. Like my mom is like, whatever, you could tell her if Obama was Republican tomorrow, she'd be like, Obama's the greatest. She's just like, she's a very pick a team, football team type person. And so it's like, she could never admit anything bad of Trump. Like could never do it. And it's like, that's, we're all human.
Yeah.
And so, same thing. It's like, there's just clear mental decline.
Yeah.
And it was very odd to me when people wanted to admit that.
Yeah. They wouldn't admit it. And then, the Democrats right now are all about, saving democracy. It's like, it's a really democratic process picking Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember her getting elected. I remember everybody voting for her during the primaries.
Right. Well, especially if you look at like what happened the last primary she was in. Tulsi Gabbard crushed her in the debate. It ruined her entire chance of getting the nomination. And she's not very well liked. And the fact, I'm just watching this whole mob crazy mentality supporting her.
Yeah,
and
one of my employees was like, man, how about Kamala? She's really coming on strong. I was like, I thought everybody hated her.
Right.
It was, it's like the whole, I think Gen Z is like, can be manipulated in anything from what I've been able to tell. I mean, we have only a couple Gen Z employees, and I love to mess with them mentally. In that case, that can sound worse than it needs to. But it's like so. Like one was like, I think the Trump shooting was staged, and I was like what? And she was like, yeah, like I think that like the Secret Service tried to kill him, and I was like, oh, okay, on that I could get on that camp, and I was like. She's like, but obviously like Kamala's, the pick and my person. I'm like, okay, well, the people that believe it's staged believe it's like fake. They're not like the people that believe it's like that the government tried to kill him are not the people voting for Kamala. I was like, just like get your party does not agree with like where you're thinking with this.
Right.
But it's people who this debate I have with like Gen Z women, which is, I tried to not ever have that debate, but it happens. Which is like, I just don't want somebody to decide what's over my body. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, that's the Supreme Court.
Right.
And Roe v. Wade is to the states, which is what everybody always wanted. Anybody with a legal degree will tell you that it was a bad ruling. Should have got reversed like 30 years ago. But now it's done, and it's in the Supreme Court. And it's like, well, you can elect more justices. Well, I don't think anybody's going to die in that's 4 years. They're fairly young. It's not like, who was it? Greta, was that her name? Who was the person there? Was like 200 years old.
Yeah. Yes. What's her name? I know who you're talking about.
Jamie, look it up.
Ginsburg.
Yeah, Ginsburg.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course she was 200 years old. Like that was obvious. But so I see these people of like, it's like my friend again. Nashville roads suck. I'm voting for Biden. It's like, okay, well, these aren't. That's what I continue to find. People that are voting on their side are like, very rarely do I find people that like are actually.
Know anything.
Yeah, and that is highly concerning. And then when people just aren't, they think when I'm like, hey, I don't think illegal aliens should be able to vote, they think that's like, oh, that's because you're a Republican. I'm like, no, this is just like an American stance that like only Americans should vote in American elections. Like this is like in Venezuela, only Venezuelans should be able to vote in Venezuela. It's like this is just kind of how it works everywhere in the world.
Yeah. It shows you how, I hate to say it, but how dumb a lot of people are. I mean, just really, really dumb people. They can't think for themselves. Very tribal, very, oh, this is the way because this is what Kamala says, or this is what the Democratic Party says, or even this is what the Republican Party says. There's plenty of Republicans that are like that too, man. I mean, like,
yeah, I call it room temp IQ. It's one of my favorite disses. You know, I mean, I don't know if it's the food. I think it's probably like food or education system and a lack of a mother in the household. But there's clearly a slow decline in IQ that's happening, and that's why when people are like, oh, everybody's dumb, and they kind of laugh about it. And I'm like, no, I think you're actually right, and I think there's real precedent for this.
But do you think it's IQ? Because there's plenty of high IQ people that are supporting Kamala right now.
Yeah, I mean, but you can convince yourself of anything. So they've convinced themselves that like that's kind of being manipulated for a reason. There's some people that just come to the wrong conclusion, which I believe is like an IQ issue.
Gotcha.
And like, I guess your ability for people to manipulate you is different at a high IQ.
Sure.
But if you have a low IQ, it's like, for example, I believe they've manipulated themselves. Like if you have a high IQ and you're voting for the Democratic Party currently as it sits, I believe you manipulated yourself into doing that. You know, it's like when people are like, why did you do this job? Oh, because my dad told me to. It's like you just kind of you manipulated yourself into it.
Yeah.
But some people are manipulated by what they see on the news and the TV and everything else. And I think it takes a lower IQ to be manipulated in that way.
Well, you know, there's such a hate for Trump too. I mean, so I get it too. I hear his rhetoric. The last few weeks, he turned me off with the whole Kamala's Indian, no, she's black, focusing on that because, I mean, the reality is you're not going to gain any new voters.
And when you just like bash Rogan for no reason.
Oh gosh, man.
It's like, that's the worst, dude. You're at every UFC fight.
Yeah.
And like,
do you really think these people are going to boo Joe Rogan? I think that they actually like Joe Rogan more than you, Trump.
Yeah.
They like you. They love Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I mean, so some of these moves, it's like, I've just never understood. You know, and he's just mad that Rogan won't do a podcast with him. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They've tried many times and Rogan's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, man. I look at, you know, people's thought process. I actually can see why somebody would vote for Kamala. I can. From the perspective of they hate Trump so much, they think he's just such a bad person that anybody is better than him.
Yeah, so that's where I get is that if you think who the person in office is matters, I get there. I don't really care. And like, the thing, what I love about that argument, it's like, oh, cool. She got her job from having an affair with the mayor of San Francisco. Like, that is her start. Yeah. This is a known thing. This isn't conspiracy theorists. This is like a known thing. Yeah. We know because is Bobby Brown his name?
No, it wasn't Bobby Brown, but I do know who you're talking about, whoever the mayor was.
He wrote about it.
Yeah.
He was so proud of it. He's like, I gave her a start.
Yeah, he gave her a start, all right.
And so, you know, her morals are questionable too, and I think it's sad when both people who are in for president have questionable morals.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, I can't do anything, and you can't really do anything because Tennessee's going to go red.
Right.
So we've done our part.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's just an interesting thought experiment as to how people are thinking in the country because it seems like we're moving towards the idiocracy movie. I mean, it's just more and more idiocracy every single day, and
we got to get families together. It's the only thing I can think of. I mean, that's when I see this, it's like, man, I get how you get to there if you didn't grow up with a mom or your parents worked all the time, or it's just like I think when the fabric of America is the family unit, and when you start to destroy that family unit,
it would be an interesting poll to see married couples. Who they're voting for. I've never seen that.
Yeah, married couples with kids might be a good one.
Yeah, married couples with kids, Trump or Kamala. Kamala. Trump or Kamala. I don't want to disrespect her name. But I would think that the families would be more conservative. I look at like the black communities too. And I understand why they would vote Democrat, as in the Democrats really market to the black communities. But you look at a lot of the black families; they are more conservative in their thought process. I've got some friends that are black on the in the state house, and they're pretty conservative people. They're just part of the Democratic Party, and it's pretty interesting. I think the Republicans have done a really bad job of explaining why their policies are better, and didn't really focus on it until now. I think we're going to see a lot more black people voting for Trump this go around.
Oh, for sure.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, when they realize this, the party that they've supported for the last 40 or 50 years has done absolutely nothing for them. You know, you even look at after the Civil Rights Act, when they started, incentivizing black women to not be with their man because they got more money on the from the government, breaking up families. I mean, the problem right now in the inner cities is you don't have fathers in the homes.
Yep.
I mean, it's fatherless homes, and that's not racist to say that. They like to try to suggest that somehow it's racist to say that. I wish that every family had a mom and dad in the home, because when you don't have a father in the home and you have a boy, you know, he's not like a woman does not know how to raise a man generally.
Yeah.
It's different. It's very different.
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, how do so many of these kids end up lost? It's like, well, yeah, they don't have a guiding star.
That's right.
It's such a motivation for me as a dad of like, I'm choosing to spend a lot of my time with my kids because I believe that investment is good for society.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one, if I ever got into politics, I'd want to tackle publicly as a white dude, speaking very openly about it, because I think the language that we use to people matters as well. So when we call people marginalized or oppressed, or we tell them that the whole system is against them, you know, the worst thing that could happen is they believe that.
Yeah.
Because if they believe that, it is. I mean, you know, think about the things that you and I go through every day. We choose to look at things in a certain way. We could also choose to see how the world is always against us.
How many employees have told you when they quit, this business is not going to exist when I'm not here?
Oh, yeah, God.
Yeah, it's like this silly, like I'm sure in your head that's how, but if I was to believe that, it's like the Think and Grow Rich, I always thought was really silly until I realized like, oh, pretty much every successful entrepreneur I know believe they would be somebody.
Absolutely. You have to believe it. And, I think there's a lot of well-intended people that use these terms, marginalized, oppressed, or, are really, pushing that there's systemic racism and these type of things. But all that does, if you know about success, we know about how to be successful. All that does is teach people to be losers.
There's a ministry here that helps like black entrepreneurs called Corner to Corner. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, we help underprivileged entrepreneurs is what they say. And I'm like, yeah, all entrepreneurs are.
Yeah.
And where I think so many of these nonprofits get it wrong, especially them, and I'm involved with them and I've told them this, so that's why I can talk about it, which is that like you're playing this game that like you're everybody's cheerleader. Mm-hmm. And you need to tell some of these people that's a terrible business idea. Like we don't need more food trucks. Like we don't need another barbecue truck. Like somebody should tell you this. When you start a nacho company and you get your cheese from Costco, like you're not, there's nothing special.
Right.
When you sell candles, it's like if you really want a candle business, and there was actually something unique about this candle business, and I worked with the founder, and we got her in lots of places by just saying that she was black. It was a black-owned business, mm-hmm. and there were people looking for black-owned businesses. I mean, it was racist, but it worked for her and her advantage. Mm-hmm. But I just used to say, like, if this fails, if nobody wants this, it's because the candle sucks. It's not because you're black. I just want you to understand that, like, from the start. And I think that's just so important for people to understand that, like, business is freaking tough for everybody.
Yeah.
Regardless of color.
Tough. Well, they talk about the gender pay gap as well, which is the biggest bullshit ever. I mean, imagine this. If we could hire just women and save 26% on their salaries, I would be just hiring women. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But it's not the case. It's not the case. Women work less hours. A lot of the studies, it's really interesting. They're doing the entire pay, not considering hours worked. I'm like, let's break this down by the hour and see if women are actually paid less than men. It's not a thing. It's completely made up.
Yeah, and it's like, because like I know thousands of entrepreneurs. I really know. I know so many entrepreneurs, and never once have ever been like, well, I like to hire women in this role because I get them for 20 grand a year or less. You know, it's like, it's not a thing.
It's not a thing. I mean,
we pay on roll.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be account manager at a company, it starts at 80, can go up to about 105.
Yeah.
And we have currently of our account managers, like 7 of them are women.
Yeah.
And I would say like 5 of the highest earners are women, and they're women without kids, and they're women that want to make a bunch of money, and they like, you know, they're driven for this job.
Yep.
And like sales, like same thing. Like, I don't know. I just hire people that are good at sales. Like I don't read resumes. I just interview people. And then I'm like, you know, what'd you do at your previous company? I'm like, all right, I'll give you a shot.
Exactly.
Like
Well, it's about merit. You know, if you're a business owner and you can save 26%, you're going to save it. Number one. And I mean, I look at my company. I was just actually doing the math the other day. The majority of our directors are women. And that was not intentional.
Yeah.
That was just because they're the best people for the job. Our top patient intake is a woman. And that's awesome. I don't give a shit whether someone's a man or woman. I do not care. I care about merit and, you know, are they the best person for the job? And I think, you know, any business owner feels, you know, that same way.
We had a sales call with some woke nonprofit, and they were like, I couldn't find your D&I statement on your website.
Yeah, we don't have one.
And I was like, you couldn't? I was like, okay, I'll get that to you after this call. I just went to ChatGPT. I was like, just write a D&I statement. Just emailed it over. And I was like, yeah, you know, we're not racist, if that's what you're wondering. It's like, well, no, I was looking for more of like the makeup. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, people apply at the job, and the best people we try to hire. And, you know, thankfully I'm like one of the few like white males at our company. We have a lot of, I mean, we just kind of everybody, but it's like typically people that do good in tech are not like, we have a lot of Indian and Asian and like, you know, people that are good at math. And Asians are really good at math. Like it's not like, it's just a fact.
How could you say that?
Yeah. And so, but it was so funny because I just sent this ChatGPT generated statement on a Google Doc that I like literally pasted and sent over. I was like, here's our DNS statement. She's like, great. We just subscribed online and booked our onboarding call. I was like, sounds good. It's like they were just looking to check a bots. I was like, yeah, I'll help you check the bots. No problem.
Yeah. Our company is like the anti-DEI. If a customer asks for that, I would tell them they're not the customer for us personally. And I mean, you know, we have a podcast I have a podcast that I talk about anything and everything. So, you know, customers could listen and say, oh, I don't want to do business with you. And that's perfect. This is set up to where they can watch our podcast. And if you don't like me, please don't come to our hospital. Please don't let us help save your life or fix an issue that you have, please, because you're not the type of customer that we want. We don't want this. It's like the woke mind virus. We don't want those type of customers because they bring everybody else down. They nag and they look to be victims and they look to complain. And, you know, a lot of them are Karens. We don't want those type of people. So, you know, when I hear that, I'm like, who? I'm like, who? I understand it's your business. I'm not knocking what you did, by the way. But I would just be like, who gives a shit? Why do you care so much?
That is why I sent it, because I'm like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Like if they were like, watch this podcast and we're like, you don't actually care about D9. But it doesn't, you know, because again, we have so many customers. We have tons of customers with tiny amounts. So when one leaves, we don't notice. When one gains, we don't really notice.
Sure.
And so, you know, the good news is these customers met me one time on a sales call and never talked to me again. So they never think about me.
It's just fine. I get it too, by the way. I'm like totally not knocking it. I'm just saying like,
I mean,
ours is designed that way.
Yeah.
We are designed to not have wokies coming to us. And
see, it's kind of like fun for us. Like when we get somebody with like pronouns and like the Indian territory that their office is on, we're like, oh man, they're supporting us. Like they're supporting me to wear a MAGA hat around the office. Like it's like, to me, it's like a fun little game. And so I don't know, I kind of like enjoy it because it's this, like we had a customer. So when I was running Rabbit, you know, the BLM riots happened, and you remember everybody posted a black square on social media.
Yep.
So I was like, what is, you know, like this is, I've just always been about making change.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't think posting a black square on Instagram is going to make people like not be racist anymore.
Right.
And it's only people that aren't racist that post it. You know, it's not like some KKK member in Royal, South Carolina woke up one morning and was like, you know what? I don't hate black people anymore. You know, it's like the people that you're trying to change aren't affected by this. But anyway, so I posted a white square. And then I wrote...
You're really white to do that.
And I wrote like, hey, this doesn't do anything. This is just social. This is just people to pretend like they're making a difference.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah, it's just you're out there. And I wrote this like long post about it that was like, I'm posting this to get you to stop scrolling on your timeline and be like, wait, am I just doing this because everybody else is doing this?
Yeah.
Because if you've never done anything racist in your life, you've never like you have nothing to, you know, what is this?
Yeah.
And one guy lots of people got very upset about that. But one guy in particular hired a call team in the Philippines to call every place that had a rabbit kiosk and tell them that the CEO was like a white supremacist and need to get rid of our units. And so what he found in this, though, is that like somebody from the Philippines calls a bar and they're like, yeah, I can help. Yeah, it's 6 feet. You know, they're like, oh, we just want to let you know the rabbit. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, oh, you the thing that charges phones? Like, what? And then they got off the phone like, hey, like somebody just called about something to do with the owner. It's like a racist of the. Everybody's like, what? And like, you know, like everybody was like, I don't know what. We didn't lose a single. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
And so then I just like was like, hey, I'm going to sue you for defamation of character for saying, you know, calling all my, because he bragged about this on social. This is what I love about people. Like he committed a crime.
Yep. And
then he wrote about it online.
Yep.
And then, you know, that all got settled. I'll just say that. And, but it was so funny to me, that whole movement that everybody was like posting a black square. It's like, what are you, even my conservative friends. I mean, like everybody was. And I was like, I don't know what you think this does.
Yeah. I mean, I you know, 2020 was a different time. You know, that was the height of the woke insanity, as in they were going crazy and they had a big edge on, you know, I say normal people, because their arguments were so bad and illogical that I didn't know how to argue a lot of it. I'm like, this is just so stupid.
Yeah.
How do you counter
I face that problem
the stupidity here? This is like, you know, you think it's good for men, biological men, to compete in female sports, and you're convincing me that there's no difference at the testosterone. I mean, all this crazy. No, that's only science. I know they're full of shit. And so it was really hard. It took me a couple years to figure out how to respond to it at this point. And it's really just calling them out on their bullshit and saying, no, I don't agree. And they went complete libtard. You ever watch what is the movie? Warren, what's the movie? Nobody goes full. Yeah, Tropic Thunder.
I've not.
And it's like nobody goes full retard. It's like nobody goes full libtard. They went full libtard on us.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I remember one of my good friends was telling me that like race, like it's impossible for a black person to be racist.
Yeah, that's taught in the schools.
And I was like, wait, what?
Because they don't have power, and it's
And I was like, all right, so like if you come to me and you're like, I hate you because you're white, isn't that you're hating me because of my skin color? Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's racist,
right?
And like and he was like, well, no, because like white people have more power than black people. I'm like, well, that isn't
so stupid,
you know. And so like we're getting these conversations, like, what is happening?
What are you even talking about? You know, so that's been taught in the historic black colleges for years. I mean, I had a guidance counselor when I was in high school that I actually learned a lot from him. He went to a historic black college. It was in a fraternity. And, you know, a lot of those ideas I thought were really bad at the time, but I'm like, I learned a lot about, you know, how academia, historic black college academia is teaching people. I'm sure that's how the rest of the academia is taught now. But then I had my coach, my MMA coach. I went to a historic black college as well, Lloyd Irvin. One of my main mentors also was in a fraternity, a Q. And then Roddy Ferguson, he went to Howard, also historic black college fraternity, the Q with Lloyd. I was his agent. He always joked that I was the only white guy that could ever be his agent. And then Dedrick Perry, my business partner, historic black college fraternity as well. And so I've had so many conversations about what is taught, and I think a lot of it's bullshit. And Roddy might have a different view, but Lloyd and Dedrick would agree as well that how they position it just isn't accurate. But they really believe that you can't be racist and black. It can only be racist if you're white because the structure of power. And it's a really bad idea. It's not well thought out, but it is taught, and people actually believe it. And now I'm hearing white people finally be like, you know what, that's bullshit. Like, whatever your definition of racism, you know exactly what I'm saying. Maybe not the perfect scholarly definition of racism, but if you don't like somebody because of the color of their skin, you're racist. Yeah. And right now you're seeing racism towards white people, whether people like to say it or not. It's pure racism. If you don't like me because I'm white, you're a racist. And I think I'm better than you in that because of that. And I've been fighting for black people my whole damn life. I mean, my whole life. I've got, my fight team. I was maybe 20% white was our fight team. And, I was one of the crackers, as they would joke with me on the team. And I loved them joking with me about that type of stuff. And, it's been such a part of my life for so long that I didn't even realize until COVID, the George Floyd thing. I was walking down the street with Dedrick Perry, my business partner, and I was like, damn, man, it's the first time I've ever thought I'm walking with a black man. I've never seen him like that.
I know.
And it's sad that it got programmed even into my head to believe this bullshit, to see us as different when we should be looking at each other as brothers.
Yeah, I remember that whole thing of I was raised that I don't see color was a good thing to say, and then apparently that was racist then. It's I don't know. It's always been it's really sad when people think, and this is, again, I see it in entrepreneurship a lot. Like, they think they fail because they're black, and it's like, oh man, it's business is incredibly tough, man. Like, I don't.
You failed because it's tough.
Yeah, and it's such a tough. It's like, oh well, black people raise less money than white people on this. I'm like, I don't know. I've
never raised money, so I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I did for Rabbit, and I was like, but yeah, and there's just always when people are sharp, people are sharp. When people are charismatic, and that is what it is. I mean, you meet people and you're like, this person's exceptional. You meet people and you're like, this person's not, it's such an unfortunate virus of the mind for you to go down this slippery slope of when people spend their whole life trying to prove their dad wrong or whatever. It's just these simple, all it is just reprogramming your brain to lose.
Yeah, that's what they're doing.
And now as a society, we're just kind of doing that at scale.
You're exactly right, at scale, and we're teaching people that they're a victim, to have a victim mentality. There's no way to be successful with a victim mentality. You got to be personally responsible for your life. You can have circumstances come at you, but you can't blame the circumstances for your lack of success. And yeah, it's a virus. They're telling people you're marginalized, you're oppressed. Oh, you can't do this because you're black. What if those kids believe it? If they believe it, they're going to be that. And so it's one of my biggest things. I talk about this a lot because it bothers me. I can see why people aren't successful. It's because people have taught them that the world is against them, when the reality is you're born in America. It's the greatest country in the world. It's the easiest to start a business. People that move here legally and work in America are 4 times more likely to become millionaires than somebody that was born here. Why is that? They see the American dream. It's a land of opportunity. And it's just a bunch of bullshit that we're seeing. And we have to call it out publicly, and we have to fight back, because if not, we're just going to have a bunch of little sissies that are so afraid to rock the boat, so afraid to cause any problems, so afraid to be called racist that we live in the society that we live in today.
It's the one thing is I always post controversial takes, and I just instantly get 50 DMs. And it's and people are like, oh man, I thought the same thing. It's well, you don't write about it or talk about it or publicly agree to it.
Yeah.
And that's why I love, having a business where we have customers literally all over the world is like my beliefs never affect our business. And one of my friends always says like, dude, sometimes if I wake up early in the morning and I see a fresh story from you, I'm like, oh, I wonder if he chose war today. It's because I just like to think through these things. And there's a lot of, when you get the conclusion wrong, I guess I'm terrified of dying and getting the conclusion wrong. Right. So like, I was explaining to a friend how silly it is to be Mormon. Like, it's just Joseph Smith is a con man and he got murdered for being a con man, rightfully so. And that's being friendly. I mean, he's obviously a child molester since his youngest wife was like 11. So like, if we're going to get real deep, we can go there, but like the Gold Scrolls never existed. Jesus never came back and shared the gospel to the Native Americans. Like, it's just a silly, you're not going to die and get your own planet and populate it yourself and become your own God. And like, it's silly, right? And he's like, why? Like, we're such good friends. Why would you like put something in the middle of our friendship over this? And I'm like, because I feel this heavy conviction that I don't want to die believing something that's not true. And so I'm just always challenging these things because it's like, it would be not a life well lived if I left this earth and I got some things wrong. And so I just try to like really think through, why do I believe this? Why do I do the things I do? Why am I, and I feel like what it's done is made me an authentic version of myself where I'm okay being me. All the times I wear, I like to wear suits all the time. And, I have some pretty loud, crazy suits. They're like, oh, it's for attention. It's for this. And it's like, no, I just thought it was cool and I got it. It's like, I didn't need to play that game. Nobody sees me in a loud suit. It's like, oh, I own a business. Can you manage my website? There's no gain to me. It's just, I like it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm always trying to do is just challenge myself. Like, why do you believe this? And I think as a society, that's going to be more and more important as people are having to unlearn everything they've learned most of their life.
Yeah.
Because as an entrepreneur, how much of your first, 10 years in business was unlearning things you thought you knew about life and business?
Well, that's it. Every day.
Like my dad told me I feel like every damn day of my life growing up, like if somebody drives a Ferrari, that means they make too much money.
Yeah.
That means they're a scam artist. And you know what I found out when I bought a Ferrari?
What's that?
Is that people want to work with a guy that drives a Ferrari. They go, that guy's good at his job.
Yeah.
It's like you tell yourself these lies and then you're like, oh, that's not true.
Yeah, it's so true, man. You think about the stories that we're told as a child and we believe that might not even be real and how much that holds us back our entire life.
I know.
I mean, that's a great example right there.
Yeah.
You could have kept that limiting belief for that story that is not true. You could have lived a lie your whole life and not know that you're living a lie. That's why it's important to seek the truth.
My friend Joe, like a brilliant guy, he's a dentist, very successful, owns a bunch of real estate, loves cars, obsessed with them. Like, I don't take photos of people's cars. I don't care about what people drive. I like to drive fast. That's why I have a fast car.
Me too.
Not a status symbol, anything else. Like, I just want to go 200 on the interstate. And so he is like, that's illegal. In Mexico, I go 200, to be clear. And loves cars, tons of cash. And I'm like, dude, just go buy a Subaru. It's your dream. You're obsessed with them. You go to car, you do all that stuff. I don't go to car shows. Like, and he's just like, oh, I just gotta, he just can't. He's got this mental block that it's like a bad thing to spend that much money. He just can't get there, even though it's like his favorite thing. Yeah. And it's like, cool. You're just gonna. There is something you're just withholding with yourself because you've convinced yourself something that isn't true.
Some story.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
some story you believed. Yeah.
I mean, how much do you think that affects the average person's success?
What's the stat that like 5% of guys date 95% of women or something?
Probably. Yeah.
And and I was like, I am happily married. But like I did very, very well on Tinder, and I feel like I could meet any girl and like, get her number, get to know her, go on a date or whatever. And it's just because like, yeah, I feel highly confident that I'm like, a good partner and I'm an interesting person. And I'm like, yeah, you probably want to talk to somebody who's interesting. And so like, you can go to any, like I go to most scenarios, I don't really plan things. I'm not really a planner. And I just kind of assume everything will work out perfectly. And my wife just drives her crazy. I'm like, yeah, it just does, like I was in Japan. I went into the nicest steakhouse, and they were like, "Oh, we're booked out reservations for a year." And I was like, "Well, can you get me and my friends in? It's my birthday tomorrow." And he was like, "Yeah, this person didn't show up right this way." I was like, "Sweet."
Wow.
And so I just like, I don't know. I just kind of, I don't speak it into existence or name and claim or anything. I don't have any silly game around it. I just kind of think like, yeah, things are going to work out the way they're going to work out, and it'll probably be the right direction.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how I'm here today. Like Warren texted me. I was like, yeah, words.
Well, we got to wrap this thing up here shortly. Let me see. We've talked about the future. What legacy do you hope to leave behind?
A lot of people, I saw this meme that's like, nobody will remember, how successful you were, how rich you were, or whatever, but they will remember how hot your wife was. And it like made me like die out laughing.
That's funny.
I don't think anybody's gonna remember anything about me. And as president, maybe they remember that I was a president. I hope my kids know that I was willing to give it all. And that's for them, that's for our country, that's for what I believe. So, if you held a gun to me right now and were like, I don't know, declare faith in Muhammad or whatever, I'd be like, no, take my life. I want my kids to feel secure in being who they are and what they believe. And so that is what I want my legacy to be, is that like, you can't hold anything over me. I can't be bought. I can't be told what to do. And I don't say that as a pride or arrogant stance. It's just like, that's what I want my legacy to be, is that I was my own person. And I came to a lot of my conclusions and a lot of my beliefs through lots of study, lots of reading, lots of prayer. And that's what I hope my kids gain, is that like, our dad was who he was, and he wanted us to be who we are. Mm-hmm. And so all I can is show up and be a good, strong presence. And I know that God will craft them into who they're supposed to be.
Awesome. If someone wants to see your company, where do they go?
OneNine.com, OneNine.com.
OneNine.com. Thanks for coming, brother.
Thanks for having me.